History is being lost every single day. It happens all around us whether we realize it or not. Everywhere, even in my hometown of Chatham, New Jersey. My name is Kelly Krincek, and you're about to see a film meant to show what Chatham is like today as well as its evolution through the eyes of the people in the community so that their memories can be preserved for tomorrow's generation.
Chatham is a small suburban community that's very proud of its history. It has a great history going back to the colonial times, and it's a community that has always been full of community spirit. So people who preserve the history and remember it and keep on telling stories about the history of Chatham, but also people who maintain the traditions of Chatham.
Well, it all started down on the east end of Main Street. I mean, down where the Passaic River runs. The Passaic River was a lot larger in the old days. And then our Main Street was part of the Minisink Trail. The Native Americans, Lenapes, I guess, they used that, what is now our Main Street. I guess it was like a large dirt path at the time as a way to go hunting. William Pitt, Earl of Chatham, was a member of Parliament back during the war. And he was the few British Parliament members that supported the colonists in their fight for freedom. So we had our name. I think in the 1830s, the first train came through, and that made our community expand westward.
The railroads always had tremendous impact in Chatham, and as the railroad evolved, Chatham evolved, and vice versa. Prior to 1837, when the first train arrived in Chatham, Chatham owes its position in the railroad a bit of a lucky accident. If you look back in history, a lot of investors in the Morris Canal were in Morristown. And when the Morris Canal was built, they bypassed Morristown and went to Boudin. So the folks in Morristown decided they were going to build a railroad to connect to the big city, which New York was the focal point then. New York wasn't quite as big an interest. And maybe surprising to people, but you know, NIMBYism was alive and well back then, because there was actually a strong opposition to railroad down from some businessmen. So Chatham was a natural stopping point, and that basically was big business here. You had inns, you had people who would rent beds or rooms, and so having people stopping here overnight was, especially during certain times of year, a very big business. So along comes this railroad. So now all of a sudden people don't have to stop overnight. Now it's possible to ship your goods and get supplies in over much farther distance. In 1984, they modernized the line here and got new equipment, and we finally had trains that were air conditioned and such you didn't have before. And then in 1996, they began running trains directly to New York City.
I think there's a real community feel here. I like the small town. I love being able to walk into the shops of merchants and restaurants, and they know your name. They say, oh, hi, Mr. Britt, hi, Tony, how are you? And you in turn know who they are. So it's very much like walking into a little small town where everyone kind of knows everybody. And I know that's an oversimplification, but it's kind of a nice feeling.
The store dates back to 1860. It is, if not the oldest, one of the oldest standing structure buildings in town. There is a picture up on the wall over there, and it shows us back in 1897. It was a general store, a apothecary. It served many purposes to the community, and it's truly a privilege a privilege to be a part of people's lives, you know, and their stories. And you are here at DJ Crater.
We are a family business, 4th generation, my husband's side of the family. My father-in-law bought the business in 1930s from T.M. Ward. And the building is probably about 120 years old, has a lot of history. Way back it was a TV store where you would come and get your television repaired. And then it evolved into a few other businesses. When we first looked at the building, it was a baseball card store. We're kind of like Cheers here. Everybody comes in, everyone has a story or a happening, and we participate in just about everything that we can. We feel Chatham's been very, very good to us, and we want to pay back.
I would say community is the best way to describe Chatham. I like to think of this place as the word would be home. I think we kind of serve, many purposes in the town, and purposes that I think are needed for a downtown, to just have a casual spot for kids to come eat, families to come eat, and even like I said, if you want a nice meal, you can come in the evening and relax and have that too.
Our store is a classic downtown store. It's very convenience-based. People will come in when they have a specific need, whether it be mouth guards. We tend to differentiate ourselves by carrying Chatham gear. My grandfather was actually a butcher in this store and the next store when it was a Safeway back in the late 50s. Also, my father and his brother owned a hobby shop, Merrimack Hobby Shop, down where the Maytag, Snyder's Maytag was, right off of Hillside.
I think one of the biggest goals that we have is really creating a comfortable environment and really helping kids find balance. So I think the biggest change is them coming in as young children and leaving here as young men and women, and really experiencing so much that makes them, has them prepared for leaving here at 17, 18 years old.
So Chatham High School is very one of a kind because it allows for people from different grades to able to basically interact with one another on a daily basis, actually, because of clubs. You have team sports, as well as Cougar Pride, which is a big thing. They have the whole hashtag Roll Cougs thing that everyone likes to post about. So it's a very, you get the real feel of the school, kind of like a family almost.
At the high school, it's kind of like, look, you've been doing this for 3 years. Now it's time to step up your game, and it's time for you to start really preparing for being independent and not having anyone watching you. But there's still just kind of you have a nurturing atmosphere about the school that allows to say, hey, are you struggling in a class? Come in for extra help and we'll do the most that we can to help you.
You learn more than just an education, so that's what the high school's about also.
I think as we've grown, there's a lot of history that I've kind of looked back at, like the age of the building. I know this building was built in 1962. Our auditorium was built, I believe it was 1974. I think the high school has been the center of our community in many ways. I think we've had the success we've had in the plays and our musicals that we've had, where the community comes out and we've had great selections. It's not just for the artistic nature of the production, it's for the community entertainment. I think our Cougar Weekend does the same thing. Most recently, we've had to add bleachers to our to Cougar Field just to accommodate the number of people, and I'm talking about adults, children that are younger than Chatham High School, and really community members.
And in Chatham Borough, each high school grade, freshman through senior, made a float on one of these trailers. And it was like a pep club thing, and the grades rallied around it. Make figures, you'd have mannequins,
and an excuse to go out on a school night.
Right, and they would get judged. And I don't remember actually who did the judging, but they would get judged. And the night before, they would drag the floats around town, and the band would play music, and there'd be a rout. And my parents would sit on the porch, and people would come out, and you'd have the big thing was whip the twip, because it's the township, TWP. So there's always some whip the twip theme of something.
I think that was an extension of the whole pep rally at the school, where they had the football players got announced, they had the homecoming, king and queen, the court. That was always the
Yeah.
night, always the night
Yeah,
before
yeah, yeah,
Thanksgiving.
yeah, yeah.
Then the floats went around, and then the game was the next morning.
I feel so lucky to work in town, having grown up here. And I actually grew up with both my parents were teachers in Chatham. My dad taught at the middle school. My mom was a special ed teacher at Washington Avenue. So it's pretty amazing then to follow in their footsteps and be a teacher here as well. I teach 4th grade. And when I think back to my our graduating of the high school, it was like 400 people total when we went there. Yeah. And now the 4th grade's about 350 alone, one grade. Traditions now the past few years, we go to Ellis Island every year because we're so fortunate with our location of Chatham to Ellis Island. So we study immigration. That's a lot of fun. We have our clap in and clap outs, which is a lot of fun too. The Historical Society for years has done the cemetery walk, the history of Chatham through the cemetery. Then we decided, I was like, well, that would be great for the 4th graders. We can learn a little bit about the history here. And so now we have an annual trip with the high schoolers help, the theater students at the high school. And they're the actors that play the role of all the people who actually really created Chatham. It's a great win-win. The 4th graders love it. They learn about Chatham. Great to have the high school kids who are just amazing, the theater students. And then we do it with the Historical Society, which is an amazing group of people who have really kept the history of Chatham alive. We've always had the Head Show, which is fantastic. That one where it's funny because there are some teachers at Lafayette who grew up in Chatham who actually have heads from when they were in 4th grade, which is insane, which is really great. Mrs. Kramer, who's just absolutely amazing, art teacher, she's been doing the Head Show forever. And I think anyone that graduated, probably from high school, one of their thoughts about Lafayette, you'd have to go back to the Head Show.
It's a hyper-local news site, so if you want to know something about Chatham, you go to the Chatham site, so that's what I do. And it's a great source for, if you want to know something about your town, it's going to be about Chatham. People probably say there's too much sports in there, but I really like sports. I wasn't a very good athlete, so I kind of enjoy watching, the young athletes excel at what they do and the team aspect of it.
The goals of the Recreation Department are to support the development of recreational sports in an all-inclusive manner. With Chatham Recreation programs, there are no cuts. Every child makes a program. They have a high degree of participation. One note that's interesting about Chatham is that there are no sports in the middle schools. If you look at our neighbors, Florham Park, Madison, Summit, they all have middle schools that have sports programs, and Chatham does not. So it's very interesting that the recreation picks up that void, the sports that they have, and I may miss some. Boys and girls basketball, football, cheerleading, field hockey. Field hockey is now a boys and girls sport. Tennis, basketball, softball, baseball. They started a cross-country program in the fall, a spring track program. They have youth hockey. They have ski trips.
Well, the library pool, I feel like it's a great pool because it's small like Chatham.
They had the lessons for the kids at the swimming, learn how to swim, as they used to call it, the puddle.
Yeah,
yeah.
I actually did swim lessons, and I've gone to the water carnival a lot. And it's just really fun, and I love bringing my family members there.
The department's 118 years old. Started May 8th, 1898. From guys actually building their own equipment to purchasing custom equipment now, and technology and computerized equipment that we have today compared to years ago. It was, the first original thing was a hose cart where they pulled it themselves or rented horses to take it up the hill, and the guys rented the horses and took the money out of their pocket to do it. Years ago, you'd see pictures of guys fighting the fire and they'd just have their shorts on or street clothes, and occasionally you still see that, but not as much because of protecting themselves. And guys didn't wear air tanks. You know, they call them leather lungs. They just go in without a pack or anything. Today, it's like you go into a fire, you almost put on 70 pounds of equipment. When we joined the fire department, a lot of the younger people at the time, in the 70s and 80s, they were on a big kick of going to parades and stuff and cleaning up and maintaining the equipment. And, you know, thus, you know, all those trophies in the cabinets and stuff are hours and hours of guys cleaning equipment and just the fun we'd have doing that and competing. 99.9% all volunteer. And in order to become a fireman, you have to put in 200 hours in a class just to pass firefighter 1 class. That's just 1 class. And that's not all time, that's not compensated. And, you know, we don't do it for compensation. We do it for the occasional thank you or walk down Main Street. The best time ever is like walking down Main Street on the 4th of July.
This department has changed somewhat, but it's still community orientated. Growing up in Chatham, it used to be just a few cops that they lived in your neighborhood. The Brinks, the Locks, the Snyders, the Nautas. They were all our neighborhood, or we knew them from football or coaching or what have you. And that part has changed. And then also, used to be the cop walking the beat downtown would go to the yellow phone in front of the Carousel hair salon there in the corner of North Passaic, Maine, pick up the phone and talk to headquarters that way, and headquarters was down the street. This was a school. So that part's changed a lot. The phone no longer is there. Brian takes care of downtown.
We're also held to higher standards now. You know, we recently, it was in 05, was it, or no, 08, when we received the CALEA accreditation. So it holds all the officers to higher standards. We also have a nice program for the seniors in town. It's Operation Reassurance. It's for any senior that lives alone. They're required to call in by 10 a.m. every day of the week. And that way, if we don't get the call, an officer can follow up and just make sure that everything's okay. So it's a great program that the borough offers.
It's the actual communication between the citizen and the police department on a totally friendly, we got your back basis. What I've also seen with the emergency squad and the fire department, the volunteerism, the sense of community in this town is far stronger than in the average town. And I always am very appreciative. And when you think about retiring and going somewhere else, I was a police officer for 26 years here, and I retired and went on to working as a civilian here. And I can tell you that everywhere I've looked for that kind of community, that sense of belonging and the way everybody takes care of each other. And it's hard to find.
The squad actually started out by being the fire department. The fire department is actually the ones who started it. And there's actually a great picture of the first original fire engine that looked like it's essentially a Cadillac, like a little Cadillac, and the guys all look like little good humor men with their little red hats. It's really awesome. But it started out with only about 8 guys. And then it just grew and grew as the population of Chatham grew. And it took a while to get some women in there. I wish I had some information on that. It's on the website that women didn't come in for like about 30 years. And then they finally started to get 1 or 2 women on board. And now we're really fortunate that we have probably about half women, half men on the squad. Nice mix of different backgrounds. And I mean, we're fortunate today that we have the 2 different buildings. We are in the borough and the township, and 3 different ambulances and we have a good number of members that live in the borough, live in the township, so that we can really get to any kind of emergency as quick as possible to help all of our residents. And I'd say we're really fortunate as a community because we have so many people that are willing to volunteer to be on the squad, where a lot of our neighbors are not as fortunate. I think that's one great thing about Chatham, is that there's always been a lot of people around who are willing to volunteer and contribute to the town, which is really fantastic. And to donate to us, so all of our services are completely free.
The 4th of July parade has got to be the #1 thing. It's 62 years of that parade, which is run by the fire department. Hundreds of members of the community are involved in the planning and participation in the parade. Thousands of people line the streets. You know, they put out chairs on Main Street. And it really is like this all-American small-town parade that, you know, isn't very elaborate, but it's a tremendous amount of fun.
Well, the 4th of July is just like such a cool experience in Chatham because it's like everybody just kind of, it's like you see people like hanging out like the windows, on top of shops, everyone's lining the streets, people have their chairs out like days
all along
early.
Main Street.
It's just, it's
So
such a
popular.
cool sight, and I used to walk in it when I was younger with Colony Pool. We would walk in it every year.
The 4th of July was a big thing with
Yeah, it's a
our
big
family because the family got together.
Well, I think it
And
still
friends
is a
and
big
cousins,
thing.
we
They
had-
came from different states
And we
everything,
had
right.
shirts made
Right.
for when it was 25 years with
Yeah.
the 4th of July. With
Well, it
cousins
still
and
is a
stuff.
big thing, I think.
Oh, and-
the
oh
4th of
yeah,
July
I think it is, yeah.
Just one of those things that kind of always makes me feel so like a kid, makes you feel like you're really at home. It has to be the 4th of July. I mean, when that like the cannon goes off in the morning, it's like, okay.
When we were kids, man, that was a big,
big day.
deal. Memorial Park,
Yeah.
the Major League game, which was 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, at like 1 o'clock, followed by at like 4 o'clock, the Tri-County game for 7th and 8th, and everyone in town went to those games and packed that hill. You thought about it when the season started in April.
Yeah.
I want to play in the 4th of July
Yeah.
game.
Fishwack was a highlight of the year when I was little, growing up. They had a huge thing up at Memorial Park where they would have militias come from all around, different states, fife and drum corps, and they would camp out. Really neat. All kinds of fun stuff. We'd get to stay out late when I was little. Definitely a highlight. It's evolved into more of a like town kind of festival thing with the businesses now.
Everyone gets like really excited about it, and we all know what time of the year it is, and it's also really good because it's like at the beginning of summer, so it gets you like excited.
Yeah, and there's like something for everybody there. Like whether you're there for, I think they serve like food or something, or if you're there for the run, or if you're there just to see different people around your community that you don't get to see frequently. It's a great time all around.
Fishing derby put on by the fire department. Fire Chief Kelly dedicated down behind Milton Avenue where I went to school. They made a pond, man-made pond out of a stream, and every year the fire department graciously hosts a fishing derby for the kids, and we go down there and they stock it with trout, and some of the firemen sleep overnight, and some of the kids that are friendly with some of the firemen friends get to stay over at night, and it was absolute highlight and something I took my daughter to when she was little as a rite of passage in Chatham.
Also later on I got older, Saturday night I'd go with my dad. He would pick up his newspaper at Patterson's newspaper store, which is on the corner of Main and North Passaic. I think there's a restaurant there now. And Saturday night there, and then he'd want to have a cold beer, so we went to Caulfield's Bar and Grill, which is where Charlie Zan is now.
Okay, I'll tell you something that we used to have in the 30s. The town would put on a pageant, and they called it at the pageant ground. It's all open, and we're right next to the river, and they would put on this big pageant. And I can remember they had a stage that looked like a ring fighting.
Yeah.
And I remember getting up there and being part of the pageant. Maybe I was 5, 6, and singing Turkey in the Straw.
Oh, that's
And
great.
I
That's great.
So that was fun. Every year we had this pageant at the pageant ground. Passe. Now we have Fisher One.
Although I have to say, a big one too was like when we broke the Guinness World Record in town. That was exciting. So to be able to, and that was a historical society. Did that and to have it was on Fishwack. That was in what 2014.
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah, Fishwack 2014. And it was an amazing, beautiful day. We had an insane amount of people who came out because it was so beautiful out, I think, and we had Fishwack, and so we had over 1,200 people show up to break a record that was just under 400. So we totally blew the record out of the water. Is the anniversary of the train? It was like the train station being in Chatham.
I was at the bank getting some change, and this young lady with little girls, walked towards me and said, "Do you work in Jabberwocky?" I said, "Yes." And she hugged me out of nowhere. She said, "I used to come there myself. Now I have a little child. I'm going to be there." it's the opportunity I can get. That was so wonderful.
Well, one day we had a customer come in from the Presbyterian Church in New Providence, and she was going on a mission over to Africa. And she had asked if we had anything we could donate. And sometimes in this business, you have overruns or things of that nature, and we happen to have a whole bunch of Chatham lacrosse jerseys left over. So we donated it to them, and she later brought back photos of all the kids in Africa playing soccer in their Chatham jerseys.
Worked for the previous owner. I remember it was a heat wave, and everybody was talking about the shrubs. They're losing their shrubs. My shrubs are all dried up, and finally, at the end of the day, I asked my boss, Carmen, could I ask you a question? What's a shrub? And he didn't know how to answer that. He said, get in the car. He took me up Fairmont Avenue, drove me, and he showed me what shrubs were.
One of the funniest calls I've ever received, I was working with Officer Mahoney, and I think it was Sergeant Gunnerman at the time. It was a night call, and dispatch was right here in the headquarters, wasn't at the county. And he called and said, you're not going to believe it, but you need to go to Lincoln Avenue for a wild turkey stuck in a house. And we get there, and a turkey followed the guy into his house. He was feeding his dog or whatever. He was outside in the backyard. Opened the door, walked in, and a wild turkey came in. Then he got in a big fight with this turkey, destroyed his kitchen, blood everywhere. And we get there, we get it into a dog cage, and we end up taking broom handles and carrying it out and bringing it down to the woods and letting it go. But literally got there, it was a wild turkey fighting with the guy. He goes, I don't know, it's not my turkey, followed him in. That was pretty funny.
I mean, we have calls where, we've been on, because we're both from Chatham and we know a lot of people, we've had calls at 3 in the morning, like the elderly women that we grew up with, like, broke their hip. Yeah. And they were screaming, oh my God, are the Grubber's here?
And I'm like, oh gosh, how's your father doing? I'm like, so it's actually nice because it kind of cuts like the pain and stuff and all that they're having. They kind of like get sidetracked and they kind of forget about it.
Yeah. What I like most about Chatham is that sometimes I might watch the news, and I love how Chatham is never on the news because it's a small town and it's meant to be a small town.
I can't imagine. I mean, of course, like, I'm going to leave and go off to college and find a job, but this will be, like, the center of my life where I grew up, where I met all of my lifelong friends that I hope to talk to for the rest of my life and, be able to keep in touch with them. So this really is my home. I couldn't find another place like this.
Sense of community. I think maybe we felt it a little more as kids than we do now, but it's still there. There's still a lot of good people around. There's a lot of people we know that we grew up with. A lot of people that we know, their parents are still around, like Mr. Krincek, Mr. and Mrs. Ford. And we had them over on the 4th of July to a party. We had Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert, who were in their upper 80s, who have been in their house since 1963. And we had Mr. May and his daughter Ginger over, and Mr. May just turned 90. And they live on Kimball. They both live on Kimball. It's funny, I saw Mr. May. Those are just, I love that, because there's a history there. Their kids grew up with my siblings or myself, and these people have been in their homes 50 years or more. And it's nice to see people like that, and I think the community needs that mix.
Well, I think it's a busier town, especially the main part of town, Main Street. But the community itself is still pretty much like a small town.
It used to be you could walk uptown to the grocery store, you could walk uptown to the 5 and 10, you could walk uptown to the department store.
There were stores on Main Street that I
And
don't
the
know anything about.
stores,
I didn't
right,
see
the
any
stores
of
on
those.
Main
They were
Street,
not
there
There was an
weren't
there was a
nothing. There was
butcher.
an A&P.
I remember
There was,
butcher.
yep, there was A&P.
And a little A&P, then
right.
tucked in.
Right,
Yeah.
where the
The little one.
cupcake shop
Yes,
is right
yes,
now.
that's where it was.
And then there was a butcher also.
Yes. There was a butcher. I remember
The
that.
butcher.
Name. What was his name, Carol? Do you remember?
I'm trying to. It started with the
But
B, I
isn't that
think.
funny? I remember Yeah, the butcher.
The butcher shop.
Frank,
Butcher
yeah.
shop, yeah. But all those stores weren't there at the time either.
A lot of
You know, and
liquor stores in Chatham.
And the
When I first came to Chatham, all I saw were liquor stores.
yeah, and all the restaurants weren't there like there is today.
Well, I thought I moved here because I left the urban districts because life was getting rough there. Right. And I lived in Irvington, which is an urban community, and there was
I lived in an 1880 house. It was just difficult to live there anymore. It was a huge two-family house, and I had to leave. I said, when I retired, I'm going to move here, and I did. That's the best memory I have.
That's the best memory you have.
Just a nice place. Feels good, feels safe.
In one word, how would you describe Chatham?
Friendly.
Community.
Unique.
Interesting.
Terrific.
Comfortable.
Neighborly.
Awesome.
It's safe.
Caring.
Community. Nice.
Proud.
Happy.
Charming.
Accepting.
Home.